Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Best Practices to Accelerate Your Pivot to Virtual Events. Certainly a very topical topic presented by Meetings Today with McNeil Keenan from Cvent. My name is Tyler Davidson. I'm the Vice President and Chief Content Director for Meetings Today, and I'm excited to welcome you to this webinar. Our webinars cover a variety of topics that are very important to the meetings industry, so we hope you'll join us for them all, including this Zoom video webinar everyone's doing now, and we are too. So we do offer a number of newsletters in addition to our monthly magazine. So be sure to check us out on the web at meetingstoday.com. Today's webinar is worth 1 clock hour of credit in the meeting and event design domain for the CMP application through the Events Industry Council. And to receive credit for attending this webinar, you must be present for the full hour. And upon completion of the webinar, you'll be taken to a brief survey from Cvent and then to the related Meetings Today Webinar Club page to obtain your credit. We do encourage you to ask questions during the presentation. You may submit your questions at any time by typing your question in the Q&A area at the bottom of the screen. And should you experience any technical difficulties, just send a message in or call 800-553-8878. Before we get started with today's content, I wanted to make sure everyone is aware of some other great webinars we have coming up. Join us for the next one on May 27th at 1 p.m. Eastern for a virtual panel discussion on designing events for an insecure world. Again, another very topical theme. And also on our website, you will find a vault of information from past webinars, including this one, which is available for you to view at any time. So just visit meetingstoday.com/webinars to learn more about these events, or look under the webinars navigation tab on our website and then click on on-demand webinars in the drop-down menu and you can watch now. Now I would like to introduce you to today's speaker, McNeil Keenan. McNeil has been with Cvent for 13 years, where he is currently the Vice President of Product Management, leading the Mobile and On-Site Solutions Division, whose products include On-Arrival, Crowd Compass, and Lead Capture. In this position, he leads a 200-person development team focused on delivering all of Cvent's mobile products that enable event organizers to execute, engage, and gain insight on their attendees during the event. So without further ado, welcome, McNeil.
Awesome. Thanks, Tyler. Hello, everyone. Nice to virtually meet everyone. I'm excited to be talking today about optimizing your virtual event strategy. I will be the first to acknowledge that this is a very meta topic. We're hosting a virtual event about virtual events, but I love doing it. Clearly, I am from Cvent, but I'm not at Cvent. I'm at my home, like most of you. And definitely want to keep the conversation going. How we're going to do that on a webinar, though, is just asking you to submit your questions. And so in that Q&A feature or in the chat panel, we'll have our eye on those. We'll answer a few of them throughout the presentation, and we will have some time at the end for question and answer. Usually we'll have about 15 or 20 minutes for question and answer. And this has been a hot topic, so definitely look forward to hearing from you. So let's look a little bit at, let's see here. We'll get this started, maybe. Okay. Oh, I knew I was going to do that. Hold on one second, guys. All right. And all right, perfect. Okay, so today's agenda. So we'll start with kind of a high-level overview of what the techscape is in the industry. And then second, we'll look at what the true makings of a virtual event. So what are the key things you need to execute on to have a successful virtual event? And finally, we'll look at how Cvent helps. Now, it's not designed to be a sales pitch, but it is designed to give you some real-world examples of actually how you take technology and apply it towards executing that real-world event. Now, we also have a survey after the webinar. So if you complete the survey, we'll send you a gift card for a free cup of coffee as well. So keep an eye out for that at the end. And if I could, there we go. Okay, so first, what is this? Well, this is what events looked like 90 days ago. right? This is your breakout room or your keynote speaker, the presentation, the live audience. And as you designed an experience and crafted that experience for your events, you put yourselves in the shoes of your attendee and executed on it. But now the shoes of your attendee look a little bit different. They don't really look like shoes. Maybe they look like slippers. And that this is no longer your event venue. It's their desk. It's their laptop. And so it's really unlearning everything we collectively knew about what it meant to present content at an event and rethinking it through this new lens, right? The lens of this is your audience member in the comfort of their own home or hopefully eventually their office and eventually back to in person. But you're really going to need to be thinking about this new medium and what you can do with it. Now, it can be a pretty powerful medium. It could even be used to host events that maybe we never thought of before. This was actually me attending a virtual wedding just a couple of weeks ago. And as they say, if you don't take a picture of it and didn't post it on Instagram, it didn't happen. So of course there were some Instagram posts about this. Even my friend that got married, he got interviewed by the BBC News. Now, we're not here to talk about how to host virtual weddings today, but I do think just, seeing how powerful the technology can be to really make the best of what could have been a bad situation, not being able to celebrate something like a marriage, with your closest friends and family. This wasn't as good as in person, but, was able to kind of bridge that gap and bring everyone together to celebrate virtually. So if it's good enough for weddings, I think there's even new opportunities for how virtual filters into your events program. At Cvent, we always talk about what your total events program looks like, from those tier 3 events, of which they might be small, relatively non-complex and numerous, all the way to your marquee annual program that you may have. And it may not just be events that you're hosting, it may be events you're attending, but virtual is going to be now a new part of the mix. Now, I think ultimately in the future, virtual isn't going to cannibalize live events. I think it's going to extend live events, especially when you think of it at a program level. So what does that really mean? Well, as we're all discovering this new medium and how powerful it can be, I think this is going to be just one new channel. You're going to have your live events that you host, your in-person events that you host, your in-person events that you attend, and then you're going to this new virtual event channel that's going to also help you engage your audience and drive conversions, whatever that might be, whether it's fundraising, renewing memberships, or selling that next product or service that might be the next best offer. So when we think about what it really means to be part of the Total Events program, really it means the goals tend to be quite similar. So virtual events, just as in-person events, helping you build brand awareness, generate leads, create and accelerate sales pipeline, driving revenue, retaining customers. I don't need to read the whole slide. I'll leave out that last bullet point. But ultimately, it's going to be the same powerful channel, and we believe in the power of live, whether it's in person or virtual. So what does the techscape look like? So play on the word landscape, obviously, but it's a bit complicated. There's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of nuance. And what's the difference between video conferencing and live streaming? Is it the same thing? Is it different? So I'll try and give you some insight and perspective into that today. So why don't we start with video conferencing? So video conferencing are typically tools like all the way down to the consumer level, like FaceTime. But in the business world, we tend to see tools like Zoom and WebEx and GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar. They're designed to have a conversation. So everyone that logs in is expected to participate in some way, to talk, to present, to share their screen. And so I'll show you some examples of video conferencing providers in just a bit. But then you've got webinar technology. And that's really designed for one or a few people, like me and Tyler, to present to a lot of people. And we don't necessarily expect you guys to present back. So just so you know, you're not sharing your video or your sound right now. I've had people ask those questions before. So you can only see and hear me and Tyler, of course. And so those are the webinar technology providers. And then you get to live streaming. Now, live streaming can be used to hold what you might call a webinar, but ultimately these are tools that historically have roots in the business to consumer space. So the B2C space, like YouTube or Vimeo. They're designed to not just cast to 100 people or 500 people or 1,000 people, but they can easily go to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions. In addition, they allow you for more advanced production techniques, so that if you want to include things like interstitials, cuts and fades, and you want, on recorded content, multiple video feeds in a highly produced, almost broadcast level production, the live streaming tools will enable you to do that as well. And so really kind of taking it to the next level. Now, there's a lot of other players in this space, like event management companies like Cvent, and how they handle the registration and maybe hosting and providing a nice shell of experience around the virtual event. There's virtual conference platforms that kind of recreate almost to a skeuomorphic level, a real world event, and they try and kind of represent that real world event on a web page. That may not be the best way to think of it, but it's largely what that virtual conference platform would be. And then you have the video CMS providers, more traditionally for on-demand or recorded content, but increasingly playing in the live casting space, and then the more traditional learning management systems. So here are just some examples. Sometimes it helps just to see the logos here. So when we look at the logos, just move the slide, there we go. You've got some of the biggest players here are Vimeo and Ustream. So Vimeo actually acquired a company called Livestream, now called Vimeo. IBM acquired a company called Ustream. I believe it's now called IBM Cloud Video. But then you've got other players, of course, YouTube, Boxcast, Brightcove. These are going to be some of the biggest names you'll see in that live streaming space. Now, in the video conferencing and webinar providers, typically these providers have both a meetings product and a webinar product. And there's kind of a range that they typically both provide. But Zoom has been in the news quite a lot for, one, some of the security concerns, happy to talk to those, but two, just how much demand and usage they've gotten, where they've literally more than 200x the usage they saw before this crisis. But also, the tools like GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar, WebEx are pretty prolific in the market. And then finally, you've got these, what I might call legacy virtual conference providers. They've been around for a while, where you've seen these tools out in the market for the last 10 or 15 years. Intrado, 6Connects, vFairs, On24, and a lot of events, especially the spring conferences, moved to these platforms because they were kind of ready to go. I will say, I think that you're about to see a slew of kind of next generation virtual conference providers. You're already starting to see them pop up. Certainly Cvent's going to play in this space as well. And so you're going to see a highly competitive kind of arms race as it relates to virtual event technology that's coming up. But hopefully this gives you a sense of what's out there today and kind of that techscape. Okay, so this will visualize a little bit better for you. So this is an example of a Zoom webinar. I know we're on a Zoom webinar, so probably no need to share this example. An example of GoToWebinar, an example of WebEx. I think one thing that you'll note about webinar technology, ultimately video is going to play a bigger and bigger role. I think this whole crisis has kind of made us all more expectant of video, just like we're on today, so that the format of yesteryear of a voice over a PowerPoint is kind of dying, right? Like people at least expect video to be a key part of the presentation. So it just drives a little bit of a deeper connection.
Yeah, McNeil, I just got to add that we're quickly transitioning to that. A bunch of our webinars coming up will all be video. So you're right on there.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of us didn't even realize it was happening. It just kind of happened overnight. It happened in certain pockets and industries and became a de facto standard, but what would have probably taken 3 to 5 years of just general acceptance in society, culture, working cultures, I think accelerated it in 2 weeks. And everybody just kind of became comfortable being on video all of a sudden. Did get one question here, just so we know. Jan, thanks for joining us from St. Louis. And then one other question, we will be providing a copy of the PowerPoint, so no need to take rapid fire notes. You will get a copy of this after the webinar. Okay, so we'll keep running through here. So just a couple more examples. So this is an example of really just an event. Oops, let me go back one here. Just an example of an event website. where just a simple embed of a Vimeo or a YouTube video. So a lot of our customers at Cvent can actually just embed a Vimeo video right within the website. So they simply ask people to register, and when they're done registering, they can watch that live stream right there on the site. Now, here's some examples of the virtual conference providers. So like I mentioned, kind of skeuomorphic. Skeuomorphic really just means you're trying to recreate something that people know in the real world, kind of digitally. Think back to the original iPhones and iPads, where like the notepad literally looked like yellow paper with the lines and everything on there. So in a similar way, these are a bit skeuomorphic. Here's your kind of virtual conference hall, where you can go see keynotes or breakouts or visit sponsors. This is from a company called Intrado. So these were some real examples from spring events. So the Octane event was run on the Intrado platform. Now you may have seen it referred to as InExpo. They were kind of caught in between a rebranding exercise right in the middle of it. So sometimes it's called InExpo, sometimes it's called Intrado. It is the same platform. So ultimately, those are just some examples for you. But ultimately, what makes a virtual conference? What do you really have to do right? Well, first of all, let's think about the different types of events, because there's going to be different elements for different events, whether it's a small meeting or a webinar like this one, to a full-blown virtual conference, which might occur over an 8-hour period or even a 6-week period. We've seen some interesting takes on that. And then on the kind of horizon that I think all of us are expecting is, as events return, they're probably going to return in a small and regional way. And there's going to be an expectation that you can expand that reach by going hybrid and introducing virtual components to in-person events. So those might be your internal company or organization events like town halls and kickoffs, to your external kind of industry events or user conferences. How can you extend that reach? As travel budgets are limited, as there's still health and safety concerns, how can you extend the reach of your event to those that aren't able to travel on site? Okay, now when we think about the life cycle, a lot of the fundamentals are the same. It's still an event. You still got to market it. You got to promote the content. Got to get people signed up and registered. Maybe they're downloading a mobile app just so you can kind of keep guiding them through the experience. What is the experience going to look like? Of course, we'll talk extensively about that today. And then, how are you going to follow up? Are you tracking attendance and engagement? What's the next best action you're going to recommend to your attendees? So, whether that's attendance tracking or web analytics or feedback survey analysis, that ultimately is going to let you know, hey, which nurture campaign from Marketo or Eloqua do I want to trigger? Or which sales team should be following up with our most interested customers and prospects? So a lot of the fundamentals are the same as in-person events. Now, there's a lot of different elements here, right? There's the content that you're going to present. There's the audio and the video feed. There's the interactive Q&A, which you already had some of that today. There's live polling, so potentially to get feedback directly from your audience. Are you going to give ways for them to take notes and maybe favorite slides? You're going to be thinking about recorded and on-demand content, and that really anything you present live, now it's recorded in a high-quality way, which is not always guaranteed with in-person. How can you leverage that kind of golden goose of virtual events, the content, in future marketing campaigns? Are you going to be able to create a sense of community, maybe by connecting members of your audience with each other through interactive video conferencing, those types of things? And of course, capturing feedback, capturing attendance and engagement. And then, another big piece is sponsorship. And we'll talk about some ways that you can bring sponsors into the fold. Some key differences, I'll talk about a couple. One, there's a lot more distractions. You don't have everyone in a room all together focused on the stage. Everybody's kind of in their own environment. And so you definitely raise the bar around how to create engagement. Think about how you watch local news. Think about how you watch sports. Think about how you watch really any kind of TV, maybe ESPN. It's very fast moving. Everything's happening in very bite-sized chunks. Local news programs are never spending more than 60 to 90 seconds on a particular topic. They help you know what's next, and it kind of moves much more quickly than a traditional breakout session. And I think that's because they know that maintaining engagement is harder. So you've got to start to think more like a broadcaster, maybe than an event manager. So the importance of the content, maintaining engagements there, and getting people there, right? You got to go the extra mile to make sure that they show up. A lot of events in the virtual world, not all, but a lot are free. So there's a little bit less stake in the game. And so you got to make sure you don't just take it for granted that if people signed up, they're going to show up. Now, let's break it down to a couple more nuanced areas here. Oops, let me go back one. So there's a whole new slew of problems to tackle, right? So scale is one. We've seen routinely in-person events that they, or maybe let's say originally your in-person event had 2,000 people there. A lot of our customers are seeing 3 to 5x, sometimes even more attendance growth. So you'll go from that 2,000 people to 8,000 or 12,000 or 15,000. I think Salesforce had an event in Sydney. They usually had 10,000 people attend in Sydney, and they ended up with 80,000 attending live. So what do you do with that increased scale, and how do you see that as an opportunity? Live versus on demand. Now, how much time can you actually ask of your audience? How much time are they going to be able to sit there and watch something that's only available live? And so you might need to be selective with what you bring live versus what you just release on demand, so that people can kind of consume that content when they're ready and when they're available. Time zones, again, an often overlooked piece of a virtual event, but not everybody's in one place. And so you've got to do some analysis of who's in your audience. Who do you anticipate being in your audience? Where are they? And maybe craft when the content's presented around that. Maybe you even rebroadcast some of the same sessions. Maybe you do them live multiple times in a day. So I'm going to do one session for my North American participants and another for my APAC. Audience participation, live video. Again, I already talked about how video is becoming the expectation, but there's a lot of unique ways that you can get the audience involved as well. And it may not be a traditional content session, but doing things like happy hours and roundtable discussions. Can you bring people together over video and keep them engaged that way? Now, on the bottom here, event length. We've seen people really realizing, hey, this is not necessarily, an opportunity to just recreate my in-person event. So we've seen some events that are traditionally 4 days go to 90 minutes. We've seen some that are traditionally 2 days go to 3 weeks, or even more recently, I think the ServiceNow conference, traditionally a 4-day event, they're going to 6 weeks. Now, they released a lot of content on the first 3 days, but they're going to have an ongoing relationship with more and more content being released over a 6-week window. So you can start to kind of reinvent the length of your event and kind of what it really means to have an event. Does it need to happen over 1, 2, or 3 days? Could it be even longer? Now, sessions might go the other way. Can you assume that the 45 to 60 minute format still holds? Or should you take inspiration from organizations like TED.com or TED, where their TED Talks never last more than 18 minutes? So you start to shrink down the content. I think no matter what format of the session you go to, I think you just got to make sure you keep it moving and keep it highly variable. Sponsor ROI. It's not a new problem to solve, but there's definitely new ways to solve it. And that sponsors are a critical part of a lot of events. And it doesn't mean that there's less sponsorship opportunities because you lose your in-person, exhibit floor, or you lose, paper signage and those types of things. There's actually all sorts of new opportunities. Again, think like a broadcaster. Do you have room for product placement? Do you have room for little video advertisements? Do you have room for sponsored sessions? There's a lot of different ways to think about how to bring sponsors into the virtual experience and make sure that they're going to achieve their goals. Now, the last piece, networking, creating that sense of community. So again, similar problems, but new ways to solve them in the virtual event world. So the way that, we look at it at Cvent, the way I look at it as a product manager, really there's 4 key areas to kind of block and tackle and execute. If you can execute on these 4 planes, you're going to have a successful virtual event. So content, we already talked about some of the key problems to have, or key problems that you need to solve. But ultimately, if you can create an engaging experience, one that also the audience can participate in, I think that will help quite a bit. Then on the community side, I'll be honest, like this is from a technology perspective, a lot of us in the event industry have kind of taken the community for granted with in-person events. And I think that's reasonable. And here's why. You got a lot of it for free. That's just because you brought people together. right? You have people flying in from all over the country, and just community naturally occurs in the lines to the bar or the session, or sitting next to each other in the session, sitting together at lunch. Now you don't really get any of that for free, and you've got to really think more purposefully about how you bring people together virtually. On the sponsorship side, it boils down to really two things. How do you deliver brand awareness to your sponsors, and how do you deliver leads? Ultimately, that's kind of the two things that they're looking for, is how do they get exposure to your audience, and how do they connect with them directly? And then finally, analytics. A lot of us have thought for many, many years about, how do we uncover key signals of buying intent? How do we understand who's engaged and who's not at our in real life events, at our face-to-face events? So we've done things like, attendance tracking. We've done things like feedback surveys. We've done things like tracking attendance with RFID even. With virtual events, the opportunities are actually even greater to uncover those key buying signals, those key indicators of intent, so that you can deliver a more personalized experience even during the event, but of course after as well. Okay, so looking a little bit at the blocking and tackling and how you would apply technology to solving some of these problems. First, I want to look at a couple of success stories. We had Vicky Wong here. Didn't have a lot of time. When the news broke, every day it was changing. So she was able to quickly create an event template, and so that it would take less than a day to launch a new webinar. She saw a great increase in the number of attendees, and she basically tied her event management platform with her Global Meet virtual platform to make sure that registration data would flow into that virtual platform. She could restrict access, so only people that she knew was going to attend that webinar. Have the attendance data flowing back to the event management program, so that all the data integrations that she'd already built out for her in-person events, they still applied. So attendance data was flowing right back to her CRM system, right back to her marketing automation system. We had another group called Q. It's an association. And in 1 week, they took a very large in-person event and made it virtual. They were able to leverage both the Cvent event management system and CrowdCompass, the mobile event app, to really host that virtual event. And they decided to get a little creative as well. And they turned that 3-day event into a 3-week experience, introducing just 1 or 2 sessions per day, because they knew they couldn't necessarily ask for 8 hours a day. And so they broke it up, and they only asked for an hour or 2 each day, and had a lot of success with that format. Now, one of the key parts that they were able to execute on was the sponsorship opportunities. So, some of just the featured sponsors, detail views, just giving ways to make sure that the sponsors are a key part of the messaging and the content. They were able to capture people's attention, and just got some different ways to make sure that, whether it was in the video content, it was in the mobile app, it was on the website, that they were able to maximize that brand exposure for their sponsors. So let's walk through it a little bit around the attendee journey itself. So let's walk through it just how an attendee would. So each different phase, from registration to how they're preparing for the event, to how they actually attend and engage in the event, and ultimately how do they re-engage with the content and the community that you've created. So first, it starts the same way a lot of events start, sending out those personalized emails, creating that compelling website or microsite. So inviting them to sign up for the event. Typically we're seeing much more streamlined registration processes. The need to capture so much information as you would for an in-person event is definitely being scaled back. And if you think that if you minimize the information you're asking, you're probably going to maximize the total audience that you have to serve for your webinar. So much more streamlined registration processes, just capturing the very basic information, contact information, maybe a little bit of information about their company as well. So get them in through the email, get them in through the website, and ultimately now they're signed up and ready to start preparing for the event. So now, not a lot of you may be aware, but with our CrowdCompass platform, we actually offer a web experience as well. It's not just available through iOS and Android. And so all your attendees virtually can come to this online event guide. They can see the schedule. They know exactly where to go to view the webcast when the time comes. If there's a password, of course, the password can be surfaced there as well. And they can even participate with things like Q&A, polling, look at the attendee list, send messages to fellow attendees, things along those lines. Now, as they're attending, of course, they can join that content. So we've kind of pointed them to it. They know where to go. They can participate in whatever that virtual platform is that you're using today, whether it's, again, On24 or Zoom or a platform of the like. But we can keep them engaged so they can start building a schedule in the mobile app. They can be alerted, hey, don't forget, we're coming back online in 15 minutes. Join back. So sending a push notification. There's even an activity feed. So, you want to create that sense of a shared experience. As more and more broadcasting content has gone to the world of Netflix and on demand, there's a couple things that really haven't. I think sports is the greatest example, where there's a sense of community built around sports because it's something we all share in real time, because everyone knows they're kind of watching that game at the exact same time. And so give people the ability to share about what they're thinking about the experience, key takeaways with that kind of centralized activity feed. Okay, well, let's see here. All right, so like I mentioned, you can also start to allow your attendees to message each other, to schedule appointments with each other, and these can be virtual appointments. So they can throw in a link to a Zoom, and they can hop on a meeting with each other. You can gamify the experience, so people kind of are able to understand everything you're making available to them, and you're able to incentivize them to check it out. And then finally, of course, capturing their feedback, whether that's through a live poll response or an actual event or session survey. It's important to understand how your content's resonating with your audience. Now, there's also the question of experience, right? And it doesn't all have to be thought leadership content, but can you craft these unique virtual experiences? So Cvent's had a platform called Kapal over the years, and it was designed to create really unique experiences in person, face to face, at craft cocktail bars and immersive cooking experiences and things at a lot of unique special event venues. So what we've done with Kapal is actually introduce unique virtual experiences. So maybe this is a great opportunity to have one of your sponsors, sponsor a chef-inar. So where a celebrity chef or a local restaurateur comes and shares recipes and cooks along with your audience, maybe a mixology class or even a magic show or a mystery game. So there's a lot of things you can check out on Kapal. It's at kapal.com, just to see what some of these virtual experiences could look like for your audience. And again, I think a really unique opportunity you could offer to your sponsors as well. Okay, so they can not only attend live, but they can also view your content on demand. So some of your content will be presented live, and you should obviously try and make that available on demand later, but some of it might be just on demand out of the gate. So you need to think about ways that you package it in maybe groups of content so that your attendees kind of understand, okay, so if I go and look at this section of content, here's 5 good sessions on this new topic I'm interested in. I can kind of consume those over time as I get availability in my personal and professional life. Now, when it comes to after the event, just like we're doing here, where we're awarding CE credits, it's important to be able to track attendance and reward those credits as fast as possible. And so we're able to do that with the Cvent platform, so that the certificate and the credits are awarded automatically. And the certificate, they can just log in, download their certificate right there, literally within minutes of attending that virtual event. Now, after the event, you might have a simple call to action like, hey, if you haven't given us feedback already, give us that feedback. Or maybe you want to have a more nuanced or personalized call to action. Schedule a meeting with a sales rep, or download this thought leadership white paper that we just released, those types of things. So you're thinking about that post-event marketing just the same way as you would as in person. So it's going to be important to tie in your event management system with your virtual provider. So in the Cvent example, we're able to do a couple of key things. I'll really boil it down into, there's 4 bubbles here. I'll boil it down to 3 for you. One is, as you create events in Cvent, they're automatically created in your virtual provider's platform. 2, as attendees register for events, they're going to automatically be added as registrants in that virtual provider's platform. So that means you'll be able to do things like restrict access to only those that are actually registered. And 3, as people log into that virtual platform, we'll be able to pass that attendance data right back to Cvent. And so everything you're able to do with attendance, whether it's CE credits, triggering feedback surveys, emails, those types of things, passing on to marketing automation CRM, all of that is possible just because we're capturing that attendance data in real time. Now, we support integrations with a lot of virtual providers. You see a lot of big logos on here that you recognize, so that we can provide that kind of integration to our customers from Cvent Event Management and there. And we do it a couple different ways. We have direct integrations. We have something we call Integration Hub, which is a service-enabled integration that we provide. It doesn't require any development, just requires some configuration for our team to do in partnership with you. And we also have integration partners that can help implement an integration with some other providers as well. So the way that it looks, really, there's 4 options. There's the out-of-the-box connector, there's that custom configured option, and then there's one that's a custom configured option that's by a third party called Streamline Communications. Now, I do want to bring up the first option because the word integration can sometimes cause some anxiety. It's not required. If you want to simply copy and paste your links and make sure that you're able to surface those up through the event website or through your mobile app, you definitely can do that. And you can grab attendance data with an Excel export and import it in the system as well. Of course, there's some advantages to doing things in real time and programmatically, but just want to make sure you're aware, you don't have to have an integration to run a successful virtual event. Now, like I mentioned, once you have that integration, or whether you're importing the data back in, the attendance data in Cvent is going to show up just how it would for your in-person events. So if you scan people in with on arrival or tracking with RFID, now it's, if they log into a virtual event, the data is going to flow the exact same way. And so just like with in-person events, your virtual events, you're going to have the event data, which is some important context. You're going to have contact data, so things like names, companies, titles. You're going to have firmographic data, so what company does this person work for? What size company is it? What industry is that company in? And now you've got engagement data and activity data for how much time did they attend or not? How much time did they spend? What did they say in the feedback survey? We'll be able to pass all that data onto your marketing automation and CRM tool. Now, it's not just about passing the data behind the scenes. We also want to make sure that your events program is well connected with your sales team. And so we want to bring that event program to where your sales team typically lives. And for many of you, that's in Salesforce. And so right within Salesforce, we'll be able to do things like attribute the event activity to your sales pipeline. So you can see, literally how many opportunities were kind of created on the backside of your virtual events. And we're going to enable your sales team to nominate, invite, register people for your virtual event right from within Salesforce. So John Contact here, it's easy for me as a sales rep to invite them or to go ahead and register them right from within Salesforce. So really, kind of your event management platform can be at the center of how you're going to be able to manage and execute not only your live in-person events, but also those virtual events. Now, the types of technologies you might want to use do tend to differ, whether it's those small meetings or webinars to your full-blown virtual conferences. Really, you can boil it down to the basics for the smaller meetings: the registration, the virtual platform integration, and then passing on that engagement data to your CRM system, so you can really kind of execute a small meetings or a webinar program at scale. On the virtual conference side, you're thinking about more stakeholders. You're thinking about longer sets of content, more exhibitors, more speakers. And so there might be more and more things that are going to get involved to really craft a pretty comprehensive conference experience as well. And as we think about hybrid going into the future, hopefully it might even be as soon as this fall, there are some unique challenges with hybrid, right? Is that now I've got people that are engaging virtually. I've got people that are engaging on site. How do I bridge that gap? Is the polling going to make sense? Like, how do I have my in-person audience respond to a poll the same way that my at-home audience does? How do I think carefully about how to present even the basics? Like, what time do sessions occur? Well, they're at 3 p.m. in the local time. But depending on where your audience is, 3 p.m. may not make as much sense. And so you've got to think through how time zones are presented and be really careful with those types of things. So bridging that gap so that you have that unified experience is going to be important. But I'd say, I was on a webinar with another panelist, and I think I'm going to steal his comment. One thing that you have to realize is you need a representative for your virtual audience to be there on site. They need to guide your virtual audience through the event. It's not going to be enough to put a wide angle lens in a session room and hope that your virtual audience likes what they see. Think about sports events. There is a broadcaster in a booth who never talks to anyone who's on site in the stadium. They're only talking to the audience at home, right? So they're your guide. You've got the sideline reporter, you've got the in the booth broadcaster, you've got the recorded content. So while it's the same event, it is a different experience, and you'd be well suited to think of it as a different experience that you need to craft for your at-home audience versus your in-person audience. So when we think about hybrid events, those are going to be some key things to take into account. Now, some interesting stats just from what we've seen at Cvent. Obviously, we've seen an explosion of virtual events. We've managed over 60,000 of them on our platform just since March 1st. So in 75 days, we've seen almost 1,000 events a day running through the platform, virtual events. And so we're definitely here to help you execute on your virtual event programs, whether they're small events to large ones as well. So I see a lot of questions coming through here. So where do we want to start here, Tyler?
Wow, thank you, McNeil. Okay, let's start with one here. I've heard some companies are starting to utilize virtual headsets to actually walk the show floor. Is that becoming a popular option?
Yeah, so we think about augmented reality or virtual reality technology. People are starting to noodle around with, okay, what does this mean for virtual events? I'd say it was already being thought of in a lot of ways. Like for one, the ability to go to a trade show, to interact with large equipment or heavy machinery or things that you could only do in person at the industry's annual event. That was a key part of the experience. But what happened for the smaller events where exhibitors couldn't afford to bring and ship expensive equipment? So they were already looking to VR and AR experiences to kind of replicate what they could do at their tier 1 shows and bring it down to the tier 2 and 3. So you might start to see similar things with virtual. Now it probably won't involve shipping equipment. That'll get quite expensive pretty fast, but can you create AR or VR experiences on your users' phones, which obviously they all have with them right there. And maybe you're just shipping a little cardboard headset to everyone. So it could be the right play for the right industries. So it'll be interesting to see where people take it and get pretty innovative with it.
And maybe we're jumping ahead there just a little bit, getting a little complicated. Why not,
Yeah, that's probably step 2.
Here's one. Here's just a good basic one. Do you have any tips, or how do you create a sense of community for the events you host? I mean, everyone's used to coming in face to face, catching up with old associates and friends and mingling. Well, that seems like it's sort of lost in today's environment. How do you sort of amp that up a bit?
Sure. Yeah. So like I mentioned earlier, just, community doesn't come for free in the virtual world. So sometimes people just have a simple live chat feed right next to the presentation and people start engaging with each other that way. I'll say sometimes that can be a little bit distracting. I know at Cvent, we've been doing a couple of small events where they're just virtual meetups. So we invite people to come and maybe we have a different topic each week. Maybe we focus on a different region. So, obviously, again, you got to think about time zones. And we invite them into a meetup room. Now, if we get too many people in the room, our company uses Zoom. We use the breakout room functionality. And so they've got a little button, literally, we can say, all right, hey, we've got 40 people in the room. That's too many. We typically want to get it under 10. And so we'll just pick 10 people and we'll put them into their own kind of discussion group, almost like a round table. And they can have a great conversation. And we maybe bring them back 15 to 20 minutes later and they can share, some of the concepts that they discussed in that kind of meetup. So I like those sensitive communities. So I'd say it's one, those kind of direct interactions, but two, it's the shared experience side. So, I would say it's going to be tough to create a sense of community if all of your content is available only on demand. So if everything's pre-recorded and everything's just play when you will, you lose that shared experience that everyone, feels that they're having when they're all attending live. So shared experiences and maybe facilitating some direct interaction, I think would be two key ways to think about community.
Yeah, we did a sort of a chat a week or so ago, and the aha moment was really the breakout rooms. And people really love that. we broke out into groups of 5, 6, 7 people and discussed very specific kind of tasks and came back and shared it with everybody. So everyone loved that. And the one thing though is like the Zoom bombers, right? And so, what are your tips on that? I've seen it
Yeah.
happen. It just happens, right? I mean,
Yeah, it definitely did. It was a lot of non-best practices going around from a security
yeah,
perspective. I mean, and Zoom got a lot of negative headlines over that. I think a lot of it wasn't necessarily that they didn't have a secure platform. It's just their default settings that especially a lot of consumers were using for personal use didn't have any of those settings on. Whereas in an enterprise deployment, almost every CIO would have said, no, these are our default settings. So they made a lot of investments in releases in the last 90 days to say, hey, by default, we're not going to have any Zoom bombing. The
yeah.
meetings are going to be secure. So it was a problem when the whole planet started using Zoom overnight. But I think they've done some pretty good investments and they've reacted pretty quickly to that to make it so without doing anything, you're going to have more secure meetings.
And I think the point you made earlier about, like, say, a sports broadcast where you have different people having different roles, you need someone there monitoring that and getting ready to boot people out if it's very inappropriate content being shared.
Exactly.
And let me, here we go. Here's another one. Okay, here's another one. It sort of comes back to the experience for incentives, like for an incentive trip. One of our ongoing challenges is how do we reward producers who have qualified for an incentive trip? How do you turn this into a virtual event and keep it exciting? I mean, do you just put it on hold right now, or what do you do?
So it's a good question. So, I got this question on another presentation I gave recently. I think exclusivity is a good thing to capitalize on. I mean, we're not going to, it's tough to recreate the beaches of the Caribbean. So, you can't try and approximate that, but, are there ways to kind of bridge the gap? One, you could defer to future years, but I think in the meantime, I think there's been some interesting things to get thought leaders, to get celebrities. Actually, a lot of these people have time on their hands too, and they don't have to travel to join a meeting for 30 minutes or a meeting for 60 minutes. So if you've got this exclusive content, this exclusive personality or thought leader that you can facilitate conversations with, I think that can be a great incentive. Whether it's a business leader or again a celebrity or a local celebrity, whatever it might be.
I'm taking offers.
Exactly. Yeah. So invite them into that incentive group, and maybe that's a way to offer that kind of exclusive experience, even though it's virtual. I think that can offer something that people would appreciate.
And how about like exhibitors or sponsorships? How do all those fit in? That's a major source of revenue.
Yeah. So, I don't know if everyone here knows this, but Cvent usually runs our user conference in Las Vegas every year, unfortunately in June. And so unfortunately that's going to be delayed to next year. But in its place, we are going to have our own virtual conference. So we've been thinking about that quite a bit. So we're doing our virtual event in August. And so, yeah, so, I mean, of course, displays and exposure and things like that are fine, but I think it's really about making them part of the content. So whether that's sponsored sessions, whether that's, making them play a bigger and bigger role in things like virtual happy hours or, some of our more entertainment oriented content. Those are going to be some things that we definitely look to do. And for us, we find it extremely valuable and an extremely important role that we serve to keep the industry talking, right? So for us, a lot of our sponsors are hotels and destinations. And so we're going to be facilitating a virtual meetings program between event organizers and marketers and destinations and hotels, the same way that we do it for our in-person events. So we are going to have an explicit meetings and appointments program that we're going to be offering in addition to sponsored content and those types of things.
Interesting. And here's kind of an interesting general question, and it's a question I always have with a lot of stuff going on in this crazy environment we're in, where everyone is like, just turning on a dime to do different things like this. How about, say the magic does happen and there's a vaccine and everything goes back to the face-to-face meetings world we were in before. Where do you think something like this fits in after that?
Yeah, so certainly, as someone that's thinking about where we make technology investments, I think in general, there's very little that we're building even that we don't see also having relevance to in person, whether that's introducing hybrid components to those in-person events, or really just new ways to activate your sponsorships and those types of things. So I think the technologies you'll see emerging for virtual events will also be quite applicable to in person. So it's going to be new takes on different things. I know I'm being a little vague, but we're pretty excited that a lot of the things we're building are going to be equally as relevant for virtual as in person.
And I truly think people are just now immersed and used to this technology. Whereas if you talk to me, like you mentioned, we're on camera now. If you talked to me 2 months ago, I would be like, no, I don't want to be on camera. And now here we are looking at each other.
Right, exactly.
And we're used to facilitating this. There's nothing like jumping in the deep end of the pool and starting to swim, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, I've been slowly amassing different, I bought a $25 light on Amazon and I got a little mic for doing podcasts. So everybody's kind of making the best of working from home and
well, I might reach out to you for some recommendations on that stuff.
Sure.
How about like a cost? Are you seeing anything out there about the virtual event? They're significantly discounting it or offering it for free. How do you gauge that?
Yeah, I think it does depend, right? It depends on your event. I wouldn't say that like just because an event's virtual, it needs to be free. But it does depend, right? So if you're a technology company, for example, doing a user conference, and it's pretty obvious a key reason you're doing a user conference is to engage with your customers, to engage with prospects. You're going to be hard pressed to charge for that because you're not providing food and beverage or hotel or social outings. But if you're an association and you're providing, like, one of the key things that people are paying for is the content, the thought leadership, the certifications, and all the efforts that go into that, I think certainly that you don't have an expectation of getting that for free. Now it may be a reduced cost, but I definitely think that we're seeing people, a lot of our customers are demonstrating success in being able to charge and still increase the number of registrations. So the example that I gave of a success case study, I believe this is correct. I may be confusing it with another story, but I think they charged $75 for a virtual pass, and they were able to get an extra 700 registrations for that virtual pass for that event. So, again, it shouldn't be a requirement for fees, but if you're doing something that's, hey, part of the event helps your organization maybe sell additional products, that's going to be a tough one to charge for. But if you're an association, again, and a lot of what people pay for is the content you're spending a lot of time and resources to produce, certainly reasonable to charge a fee for it.
And I'm wondering, and you might not know this, I have an answer to it, but like an association has a meeting, and ASAE just canceled theirs, but they meet, their board meets before to take care of business. It's like in a very official capacity as part of their bylaws. Are you seeing people doing that virtually now? That might be important for associations to know. I think our government is kind of trying to do that too, right?
I mean, pretty much everything. Nothing's off the table. Yeah. I mean, again, like the wedding example I gave you, I mean, people are now, the officiant in that wedding wasn't there in person. The officiant was actually conducting it over Zoom as well. And that was legal. It was a law that was passed.
Right.
Or a regulation, something that was passed like within 10 days before that. So yeah, I think everybody's changing and nothing's off the table to move to virtual. I think there's even news today of the Democratic National Convention looking at having significant portions, if not all, of that convention being virtual at this point.
Wow. Yeah. Interesting. And then here's one about marketing. Other than visual ads, what other ways can you think of to market virtual sponsorship opportunities?
Yeah. So I think the one thing you're going to have to realize is people are going to be a little suspect, right? Number one, marketing budgets have been hit pretty aggressively just with the crisis and the impact on the economy. Two is, it's a little bit of an unknown. So they're going to be suspect just because, hey, I could quantify the value I got before. I understood the value of scanning a lead at a booth. I understood the value of having a session and content. And so you've really got to paint the picture of how they're going to get value. You're going to have to do things like trainings. You're going to need to do specific walkthroughs of the technology versus just sending over their prospectus and saying, tell us which package you want. Not saying that everybody does just that, but yeah, hopefully that kind of, you have to get people comfortable with the new medium and show and convince them they're going to be a key part of the event. And they're going to get the value they're looking for.
Excellent. Well, we're getting near the top of the hour. So thank you for all the great content. Anything you want to leave our viewers with before we end the webinar today?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think everybody here probably is an event planner. We've got a lot of people here, and I think we'd all rather be doing in-person events. But I will tell you that times like this, like, it's a whole new world, and there's so many creative things we're seeing being done every day. It's a really cool opportunity to innovate. So, obviously, hope everyone's staying safe first and foremost. But it's an exciting time to try new things and kind of question the sacred cows, so to speak. And people are given a lot more latitude to experiment. And so definitely take advantage of that.
Well, great. Thanks, McNeil. Great presentation today.
Thank you, Tyler. Appreciate it.
And thank you for all of you who tuned in. Just thought I'd wrap it up with some housekeeping tips. Following today's webinar, you will be redirected to a short survey submitted by CVent. And upon completion of the survey, you will be redirected to today's Webinar Club page. Each webinar has its own unique Webinar Club page where you can download today's presentation, view the webinar on demand, obtain the CMP credit certificate, and more. And the speakers today have also provided some additional information on the topic, also on the Webinar Club page. So thanks again to McNeil and to all of you for joining us for this webinar today. Have a great day, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thanks.